Hey guys, Dylan here. Today I'll be reviewing the watercolors I mentioned in my previous video, the Aldi 151 artist piece set, and these are the 12 watercolors in that set. I thought I'd preface that I'm really not the best of watercolors, and I don't have that much experience with them. So for the start here, I decided to go in blind, not having watched any videos or anything, and just sort of approached it similar to how I do my acrylic paintings. My acrylic process usually doesn't involve waiting too long for the paints to dry, and again, acrylic paints, if you make a mistake, it's really easy to cover it up. A bit different than the watercolor process. So here's the end result. It's a bit muddy, it's a bit hard to differentiate values, and I think it's just due to how I tackled it. Now I'm starting a second piece after watching some YouTube videos on how to watercolor. So to begin with, I did a water wash and then I did the wet on wet technique to do some gradients, and I thought I'd attempt a more of a mountain landscape. I'm doing this in my Windsor & Newton 220 GSM mixed media sketchbook, which I assumed would be enough to handle the water, but as I go on with the process, after a few washes the paper starts to pill, and it really didn't handle all the weight of the water and the multiple layers well. So after this one, I shift to cotton rag paper, which is much more suited to handling watercolors. So these are my two attempts. They were a bit of a learning curve. They were a little bit muddy and a bit unclear, so I took those mistakes and learnt from them with my next two, I think. So I did these two alongside each other, and again I wet washed the cotton rag paper this time and tried going for two different looking landscapes. The first one more of a sunset landscape, and the second one another attempt of that forest scene which I did at the start, just a bit less muddy and a few less tones, which I think helped improve the overall composition. And while I'm not great at watercolors, I think that these Aldi watercolors did a perfectly fine job. They didn't lift when using other colors on top of each other, and honestly, for someone who's at the beginner level like me, I think that they're completely suitable. If I choose to follow watercolors as a more consistent medium, maybe I'd run into some issues, but when creating these landscapes, I didn't really have an issue, and I think it was more of a learning curve with letting it dry in between layers and just having the patience to work through them, which really isn't something that I do often. So at this point I was just adding some more focal features to the front of the composition of the sunset background, because overall in tone it felt a bit samey. The clouds, which I love doing, sort of blended into the background, but it was great to experiment to get the technique, and I use it again in my next artwork after these. And with the forest landscape, I was just making the trees, cedar trees with the iconic lines. Overall, these were some pretty simple compositions, but given my level of skill with watercolors, I thought it was better to go simple rather than too over the top, and I'm happy with how they turned out. So this is my last composition. This is actually the full A5 size of the cotton rag paper. Previously I split the two up across an A5 piece, and I thought it'd be better to go bigger towards the end because I would have a bit more experience with the watercolors. This one actually took the quickest out of all of them. I think just, again, building upon having used the mediums earlier in the day, getting a bit more confident with them, and I'm happy with how it turned out. Purple, blue and pink are my favorite colors, and I'm really happy with the pigment of the magenta color mixing in with the blues to make this different shaded purple in these clouds. I just love doing the technique where you put the water down first in the shape of the cloud and then add the pigment afterwards. It just creates that really beautiful watercolor effect, which I really hope to use later in the future. Some watered down acrylic paint from the set just to try and add some stars by flicking them off a brush. The effect I feel would be more effective with maybe a gouache, but that wasn't in the set, and I sort of wanted to highlight all the products in the set. After that I just peeled the border off the painting. Pretty happy with this piece. My favorite part is the cloud on the top right. Just love the different watercolor colors in there. Just wish I could have made those white paints pop a bit more. I hope you guys enjoyed seeing my process and me learning how to use watercolors differently and my thoughts on these cheaper watercolors. I think they're pretty good. I'm no expert on watercolors, but I was happy with the results towards the end, and for how cheap they are and in the set they come in, I think that they're pretty decent quality. If you guys liked this video, please remember to like, comment and subscribe, and I will be posting another video next week.